but within the context, the same context, but
Sure.
I may pull out and pull in.
Sure, that's okay.
So, sir, roll tape and confirm.
Yeah.
Sir, good morning. We are at PAN office with the MD, sir. I want to your full introduction, sir.
My name is Ibrahim Boy. I'm the Managing Director of PAN Nigeria Limited, manufacturers of assemblers of Peugeot automobiles in Nigeria.
So, as one of the major players in the auto industry, what does the auto policy mean to your company?
A lot of things. Importantly, it allows to put a vast industrial infrastructure back to use. We've made enormous investments, as you will see once you go around the facility. The amount of infrastructure we have put down to be able to promote local assembly of automobiles. So this policy will enable us to put this huge infrastructure and investments to use. It will also enable us to retain and absorb back some of our skilled and trained manpower that we had to lay off because of very low activity. So it's an opportunity for us to bring them back into full employment. It will also enable us to continuously develop and train Nigerians into automobile assembly technology in terms of skills, in terms of expertise and specialization. Importantly, it will also mean that we'll be back in business in a very significant manner. Our dealership network will be revived. Our workshops that are spread across the whole country, the length and breadth of Nigeria, will come back to activity and will come back to business, offering employment to people and opportunities to the dealership. It will also mean that a lot of our service providers locally will be back to business. Our logistics partners, our automotive local components manufacturers, they will all be back to business. So it's a huge change. It's a huge development for us. We're very happy with it, and we pray and we continuously will promote and support the government to ensure full-scale implementation of this policy.
So, you've been in the industry, at least as we grew up with Peugeot, with PAN, so to say, in the 80s, as we were growing up here. So, of course, we only know Peugeot and Volkswagen,
Yes.
STR and other, and Namco as well. So, how is this initiative different from the previous efforts in the 70s when we have PAN, Volks, STR, and Namco and others, when they were established during those period?
The difference now is, I think, the sad realization by the government, the impact of lack of consistency of policy. What has happened was a kind of policy reversals, and this was brought about by some certain other regional considerations, the common external tariffs, which harmonized duties for West African countries. Unfortunately, that was done without national interest. With that policy, it opened the markets for importation of various kinds of vehicles. It reduced duties. So local industries were not protected, and this exposed them to the challenges of competition. Nigeria being a very difficult terrain for any form of protection or support by the government, naturally production will suffer and it will not be competitive. So that policy reversals brought about the influx of a lot of foreign cars into Nigeria, in effect killing the local industries. And that's why the story across the whole automotive industry is the same. In the 80s, when there was sufficient protection by the government, the automobile industry in Nigeria thrived. PAN and Peugeot became a household name in Nigeria, generating opportunities for so many people. In Kaduna here, around our factory, the opportunities were palpable. You could feel the impact of PAN, not only in in Kaduna, but across the whole width and breadth of Nigeria. What we think is different today is the fact that the auto policy has stepped back and has tried to look at all the key components in terms of industrial development, in terms of local protection for local investors and industries, in terms of creating a framework that will enable investments into the sector. There are 5 key elements of the auto policy. One is obviously the infrastructure development, protecting the already made investment into the sector, but also encouraging other investors to come in and invest. And this will be achieved by extending incentives for local assembly and protection for local assembly plants. There's also the skills development component, because to develop an automobile industry, you need to develop capacity in terms of technological skills, in terms of being able to assemble these vehicles and acquire the skills from or technology from outside the frontiers. So an aspect of the policy deals with this skills development challenge. This also will create specialization and innovation in the industry. The other aspect will be the standards, because if you recall, part of the challenge with local assemblers then was the compliance with global standards. And the policy also specifically addresses this objective by ensuring that local standard regulators, Standards Organization of Nigeria, the Federal Road Safety Commission, the ITF, the NAC, are all involved to ensure that component manufacturers will operate at global standards. So this will harmonize the standards of automobiles manufacture, whether in Nigeria or outside Nigeria. And this will also encourage the OEMs to come into the sector. The major aspect also is the market development. With local with local production, you need an ability to develop the market. Obviously, the support of the government is critical. So government's patronage of these vehicles is very key. The second element is in terms of being able to provide financing for the consumers of these products. Part of the policy is to develop a vehicle acquisition finance scheme, all right, so that it will help and ease the acquisition of new vehicles by Nigerians. There is the last aspect, which is the investment promotion. Investment promotion is the central piece of the policy, because the automobile industry is a capital-intensive business and is a long-term business. So for investors to be attracted to this environment, they need to be sure of the level of stability of the policy itself. So people need to be sure that this policy will last, will outlive Jonathan administration, will outlive the next administration. Because if not, then they will be worried to come and make any significant investment into the sector. So that's why the policy, the way it is framed, is actually a medium to long-term policy, and is structured to run for the next 10 years. This, I think, will provide a lot of confidence. And what we are requesting the government to do is to actually legislate this policy and make it a law, so that it becomes even more difficult to turn, because you need consistency in the policy for it to succeed. So that's why this policy is completely different from the previous ones.
Thank you, sir. With what you've just said, so putting everything together from your own positive perspective, what are the potential multiplier effect and the developmental impact of this new policy?
They're quite enormous, believe me. It's an industry, it's a global knowledge today that with every one assembly line job you create, all right, in an automobile industry, it creates additional 7 or 10 corresponding jobs across the chain. So if PAN alone is employing, we used to employ up to 4,000 workers directly. And if you multiply that by 7 times or 10 times, that's the amount of jobs that those people will create for the nation. So there's no doubt that the impact on the economy is going to be huge. It will absorb a lot of the unemployed youth we have in the system. It will help create skills and specialization. It will help development of innovation and products. So it will not be long. Once we have a consistent policy, I can assure you it will not be long before we start to manufacture and develop Nigerian vehicles. So the policy impact is great. If you look at PAN, for instance, we have we have the suppliers, all right? We have the dealers. These dealers are spread across the country. Our suppliers of components. In a car, you probably have more than 2,000 components. In those 2,000 components, even if you localize and domicile 30% of that, all right, that is at least 600 components. Now, if you have to produce 600 components in Nigeria, you could imagine the amount of impact that will have in terms of creating opportunities for people. So there's no gainsaying that the policy itself will create jobs. Will also help conserve resources. Because when you domicile production locally, if we start with the SKD, maybe 10-15% of the cost will be localized. When we move to CKD, almost 30% or 40% will be localized. Now, this will mean retention of value within the country, because that's the value add in Nigeria. And this value add is coming from the workers, it's coming from consumption of materials, it's coming from the local components manufacturers, and is also feeding into the supply chain of selling those vehicles. We have the dealership network, we have the workshops spread all over the country, and each of these dealership networks will also employ people, and these people will have dependents. So it's a whole value chain for the economy. So I have no doubt that it's a major step for Nigeria to achieve economic prosperity.
Thank you, sir. Just have it. Thank you, sir. Tiproli. Sir, I believe PAN is one of the National Automotive Council beneficiaries. Can you tell us what you benefited from this NAC fund, and how many jobs has been created? And before you came across the NAC fund, how many jobs have you? The PAN has already created. Then after benefiting from it, how many jobs you've created? Then your raw materials. Some of your raw materials.
Okay.
So
the NAC fund, when it was extended to the automobile manufacturers, the few of them that benefited, which included PAN Nigeria Limited, the funds were used to invest into some production lines, and at that point we were in the verge of production of our 307 sedan vehicles, which we were assembling locally here, and the fund helped us in fast-tracking the assembly of that particular line. And obviously at that point the factory was in full activity, so a lot of our workers were still fully engaged, and it has helped to revive the value chain for PAN, from its local component suppliers to its staff, to its dealership network, and of course eventually to its customers. So the fund was quite helpful, because it came at concessionary interest rates against the banking facilities available then. But of course it was also short-lived, simply because the environment itself was still open to a lot of competitive pressures. PAN, with all the attendant cost of production for those items, or the infrastructural deficiencies it had to deal with, was still competing with the Toyotas of this world, and some Chinese brands that come from China to feed into this market, and where in those countries the production base was quite competitive, more than what was obtained in Nigeria. So all this combined to affect and depress the market for local automobile companies.
When the money being put in place, how many jobs were you able to generate? Because we are so much particular about job creation and wealth creation.
Well, I mean, with the factory working at full capacity, we can create as many as 2,000, 3,000 jobs directly in the factory. Now, with the other value chain activities, the dealership, the after-sales support, you also create a substantial number of jobs, almost equivalent to what you generate in the factory. Then you have the whole logistics support, and then the automobile components. And like we always say, for every direct job in the factory, another 7 or 8 are created in the value chain. All right?
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
You can just go ahead and looking at you. I will take that shot.
Okay.
You just ignore us.
Okay.
Just like
Okay.
maybe you're going through a file or trying to go through one or two things.
Okay.
So I will use that one as our build-up to the story.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Thank you, Sir Brian.
You can even walk in and discuss with him whatever you want to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.